Hey, welcome back to Boxes and Bubbles, where today we're looking at What If Miles Morales Became Wolverine from Marvel Comics. Written by John Ridley, art by Farid Karami, colors by Chris Sotomayor, and letters by VC's Cory Petit. Oh boy, where do we start with this one? Miles Morales is such an important character. There's no question about it. Not only does he provide representation for the young Black, Hispanic, or multiracial communities, he's also into science, or what some would call a nerd, which is something that comes with its own stigma within certain communities. I was introduced to him, as I'm sure many were, by Into the Spider-Verse, a stunningly stylish animated movie accompanied by a rap and hip-hop heavy soundtrack. It oozes personality at every moment, and it's a wild, fun rollercoaster of a film. Who can watch that movie and come away not wanting to see more of Miles? But that's the tricky thing though. In comic book form, Miles has been almost exclusively handled by people who are neither Black nor Hispanic. While I was researching this, I could only find one instance of Miles having been handled by Black creators, and that was in the 2018 Spider-Man Annual. While I don't want to imply that a character needs to be written by a person who shares at least one facet of their identity, it's just worth noting, within the context of what we're talking about today, that John Ridley is one of a very few Black creators who have actually gotten their hands on Miles. And if Miles is going to be written by a Hispanic or Black writer, John Ridley is one hell of a choice. If you haven't read his miniseries over at DC, The Other History of the DC Universe, please do that. It's an absolutely incredible work, and I would say without hyperbole that it easily stands beside Watchmen and The Sandman as paragons of what comic book storytelling can be, with a tiny little asterisk. I could gush on and on about this book, really, I love it so much. I really wish I had the luxury of time to make a video on each issue, because honestly there's so much in every single one. It's all been collected into a lovely, slightly oversized hardback, and honestly, I think it deserves a space on every comic fan's shelf, as well as in school classrooms and libraries. It's quite wordy, and told in a conversational monologue, as if the featured heroes were talking directly to you, which makes them feel so real. But that's also the asterisk I mentioned before. There are no speech bubbles, dialogues, or action sequences in the book, so it would be fair to say that it reads a little bit more like an illustrated short story than a typical comic book. But I'll let you decide for yourself what exactly classes as a comic book and what doesn't. But no matter what side of that fence you fall on, it's essential reading. Getting back to Miles though, what John Ridley does in The Other History of the DC Universe is untangle all of the backstory for each character he covers and then lays it out into a timeline, as if the events took place over one lifetime sequentially. He takes the major events of the heroes' lives and then looks at the time period the comics containing them were released in. Then, he weaves the real-life events and social climate of the time period back into the character's autobiographical life story. It's a gargantuan feat. I seriously have no idea how he did it, and it makes for an astonishingly poignant read. And that's exactly what he does again here with Miles, with a little bit of creative license. In the late 70s and very early 80s, there was a spate of abductions and murders in Atlanta, many victims of which were children of color. Ridley ties this in with Miles and Wolverine by connecting those abductions with the Weapon X program. So here we have poor Miles going through some changes and trying desperately to talk to his family about them. His mother is busy and his dad is arguing with his uncle, so dejected, Miles leaves the house. But he doesn't return. The story jumps ahead now to 2022, where Sentinels are hunting Miles for allegedly murdering Senator Drexel Walsh. A quick Google of whom reveals that he is an established character, killed by Wolverine, who was then under the control of Weapon X's leader. He was killed for discovering the Weapon X program. When Miles destroys the Sentinel, Director Cory sends out a stronger weapon. I'm going into spoilers now, so if you're curious to know what happens next, or if you've read it already, you'll be fine to stick around. But if you're going to read this one for yourself, it's time to bounce and go pick it up. Alright, so this mystery person in bulky armor jumps in to fight Miles, who tries to sink his claws into them. Turns out that armor is made of adamantium though, so those claws aren't going to be of much help, and they snap off, which looks so painful. Miles hasn't given up though, and goes in for a second stab. His opponent is ready for him, and grabs his other hand, crushing it and running him through with a blade. Miles is still standing and says, "Gonna have to do better than that." "I will," replies his attacker, before delivering some kind of crazy electrically charged punch right to Miles' face, which shreds his headgear and reveals his face to his attacker, allowing the assailant to see that he's been beating on his own son. Yeah, that's right. That's Miles' dad in the suit. Miles is initially angry with him, saying that it's his fault he became what he is, that his father never came to look for him. His dad tells him that he spent his life searching for him, which made him become bitter. He lost his wife, and we can assume that losing everything is what drove him to working with the Weapon X program and Director Cory. Cory interjects while they're talking. He has a grudge against Miles for scarring his face while breaking out of a Weapon X facility. He too lost his wife and children, but brushing that aside, he introduces his next weapon. Now that Jeff has failed to take out Miles, it's Sabretooth's turn. But this story's Sabretooth is another familiar face, Uncle Aaron, whose bad relationship with his brother allows him to easily turn on him. He's about to finish Miles off when Jeff comes in with his charged punch. Aaron grabs Jeff by the neck and throws him, preparing to crush his skull. Miles' healing factor has kicked in by this point, and he pops a new set of bone claws just in time to stab his uncle through both shoulders. Picking up Jeff's discarded sword, he's about to finish Aaron off when his father tells him to stop. "Look at all of us," he says. "Look at what we are. Nothing but monsters trapped in a past we can't let go of. It has to stop, Miles. It can't go on like this. Please." They share a final moment together before Jeff dies. Miles buries his father, but Cory continues to taunt him, saying that he now has an army coming for Miles. And that's when Miles meets some backup of his own. The X-Men, led by Genki, yes, that's the official pronunciation, according to Brian Malcolm Bendis, Lee. This issue was so powerful, and had such interesting ideas for Miles and his family, ultimately torn apart by the pain permeating each member's lives. I'm so bummed that it all had to fit into one issue, because this idea, given more time to breathe and fully tell its story, maybe a 5 or 6 issue miniseries, would have been something really, really special. You can see all the threads and how they bubble away before coming to a head, but page number constraints mean that it all had to be as streamlined as possible. As it is though, bizarre inclusion of Genki aside, it's still a really thought-provoking issue, and one of the best Marvel one-shots I've ever read for sure. So, as you might have been able to tell, I really dug this book. If you want to see more of what John Ridley's up to, you can check out I Am Batman, which is currently running over at DC. And that's all for this one. But if you're interested in any other books that came out recently, make sure to check out the rest of my channel and give me a follow on Twitter at BoxesandBubbles to hear about all the comics I read every week, but don't have time to make videos about. That's all for now, but I'll catch you next time.